Here we are, two sketchy dudes, getting ready for our second video cast, and we're going to talk a little bit today about a specific building that we sketched, and it was a pretty fun day. If I remember, it was a pretty crisp day.
Yeah, we were downtown Atlanta, and we were doing some urban sketching. I think it was like a Sunday or a Saturday or something like that. So the streets were basically empty. It was a little bit chilly, and it was late in the day because the sun was going down. And we found a church, Central Presbyterian Church, wasn't it across from the Capitol building?
Yeah, it's real close. I know we were walking around that area.
I do remember though trying to stay in the sun though because it was it was chilly.
And I'm looking at my picture and I'm sitting in the shadow. So
yeah, so we found this awesome church, and you and I, this is where I think that if you look at our two sketches, you'll see one characteristic of our styles. Mine is generally too short.
Better. Yours is better.
No, mine, when I get proportions on buildings incorrect, I'm usually making them stubbier. So on my version of it, I think mine's more squat. And you had the correct proportions because yours shows the actual photo of the church in it.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that's difficult to see is that when you end up doing a drawing, when you take your photo with the building, almost always the perspective seems wrong on your drawn page, and you're seeing the perspective a lot better when you're out there. You're drawing it better when you're there, and for some reason, when you put the two together, it always kind of distorts. You don't ever kind of over proportionalize, if that's a word.
Yeah,
again, we'll make up some words on this show, but it's
over proportionalized.
That's our word for today. Yeah, we also run out of paper on the page, and so the hat of my tower looks a little bit squat. So there's things that happen.
One of the aspects of being a sketchy dude is you kind of give up trying to accurately reproduce the architecture, because we've said this before. We've got cameras.
Yeah.
If you really wanted to capture the look,
take a picture. It lasts longer. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think one of the things that we always recognize is what we're doing is an artistic representation of the building, not the building itself.
It's how we see it and how it translates into the paper. You used a white dot. Did you use a grid paper?
I do. I have a grid paper on this one, and I did not follow the grids very well. Again, a lot of times it's just kind of it feels like it's the starting, blobs on a page that just feel like that something has started before I've begun drawing, but I wasn't using them as much of a guide on this particular drawing.
I used a gray Pantone. Was it
Strathmore?
Strathmore. Yeah. Strathmore paper with a Fude pen, and we'll show you a picture of the Fude pen, which is another topic to discuss, and some white pencil. So I added highlights from the sunlight, with a white pencil.
And the other thing that you did, I think, extremely well in your sketch is that you added the gray, the shadow that was being cast from a fairly large tree across the street, and onto the front facade of the church, and I think that helps your subject read very well. I put the shadow on my drawing. One of the things that we were talking about just as we were setting this up is I don't feel like my shadow on this particular drawing was very successful. It's there, you can kind of see it if you get up close. Maybe one of the problems is the drawing is in the shadow and the building is in the sunlight beyond, and that's something that we always have an issue with when we're taking photos out sketching plein air is you end up with almost two very different tonal values in that photograph, and a lot of times it's the light capturing the distance is kind of suppressing the drawing in the notebook. So
explain a little bit about this. Was like 2 years ago, and we were at different places sketching wise. I mean, it's amazing how much each of us has gotten better over the last couple of years. This is a very successful sketch for you, but you're handling hatching differently now than at this time, because you took the you did kind of a diagonal hatch on the shadow of the tree but then had the brickwork or the stone coursing in another direction.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's evolved, like you said, over the last couple of years, even more so to the point now. This was kind of early on in trying to think about how light and shade and shadow all relate on the drawing. And in this particular instance, I used some pretty heavy darks to punch the windows, the doorways, and some shadow. And I probably left all the other values a little bit too light on the drawing, in my opinion. I think the line work is good. You have to get in close to look at it, but I think from a distance it doesn't feel comfortable to me the way I can find some of those tones
what
today.
What pen is that?
That's a Mont Blanc Bohème. It's a fountain pen, and it's my only fountain pen that has it's retractable, so you can actually pull the nib by turning the base of the pen back into the
kind
nib.
of a James Bond.
Very James Bondish. It is a gadget pen. It is absolutely one of the coolest pens I own. I need to get back sketching with it again. It just I want to get some nib work done on it to make it a little bit more fine, because it's a medium, it's a thick medium pen, and so I don't do a lot of sketching with heavy ink.
We have got to tell them at some point about Mark Bacchus.
Mark will be an important person to talk about on that.
Nib grinder extraordinaire.
Yes.
People know him from around the country.
Yeah.
He happens to live here in the Atlanta area. But that's a subject for another
Yep.
video.
Gave him a shout out. We'll give him a little bit more coverage later on as we get into this.
So back to me and my sketch. We'll redirect this back around here. One of the technique that I employed on this sketch, which I was doing for a while, and when I was sketching on toned paper, I was using the white pencil for a highlight, but also using a light blue pencil in the shadows to bring a blue cast to the shadows, and that's much less noticeable on this sketch. In other words, if you were to show it to somebody for just a minute or two, they might take away the fact that it was an ink sketch. They might take away the fact that there was a white pencil overlay, but the blue is intentionally subtle just to be cool and just to kind of just emotionally connect that feeling of coolness with the shadow.
Cool like you.
Cool like me, yeah. And this was just using, again, the Fude pen, which we'll share with you. We'll talk about Fude pens in the future, but that's an instant way, a way to instantly get two different pen widths from the same nib, and I love using that. I love doing that, and it shows. And this is my sketch of the Central Presbyterian Church is one of my more successful versions, because at the way the shadow of the tree hits the facade of the front of the church, you'll see that I'm using hatching with a lighter pen weight to show the broad shadow of the tree. Then where it hits the windows, I fill it in with completely black, so the shadow itself reflects in the window pane.
Well, and you've got a very solid transition between your light and your mediums and your darks on this particular drawing, where I don't think I did that as successfully. It's still, if you take a quick broad brush look at my drawing, I still didn't define those edges as well as I would like to, and that's something that I'm doing better, I think, now, as I've looked back on some of these sketches. You know, we flip back through these books all the time,
yeah.
You know, to kind of talk about it, look at them, see what we've done, and see how we can improve. And one of the ways I think I've improved a lot in since this time was to really work on edge conditions. When you have a nice edge, mm-hmm. Make that highlight transition, really pop, because that makes the drawing more lifelike and more more enjoyable to look at.
So what about the point of view when you're sketching architecture here? I mean, you and I will get out there on the sidewalk and we'll kind of shift our chair a little bit to the left and to the right, and it makes a big difference to me, just being off 1 degree or so. Yeah. It seems to impact how I feel about the sketch and having the right point of view.
You're right. One of the fun things to do when you're actually looking at a live subject is to move around a little bit and find, what one of the things that we always look at as architects is something that's a little bit more of an aggressive angle. The aggressive angles give you a little bit more dynamic sketch. They're more fun to kind of represent than just. And that's not to say a flat elevation is also pretty wonderful to draw every now and then, but a lot of times when we're out here, we want to get the shadows, we want to get the shade and shadow hitting in a right way, and you want to be able to all the secondary and tertiary things help to make your main image better. When you find the right perspective.
Well, you and I will rarely sketch an elevation just straight on,
right?
Unless that's the intent of it, unless it's an arcade or something like that.
Correct.
The two-dimensional media of a sketch on paper needs some sort of specific angle to convey the three-dimensional original subject matter, and so being off-axis with it helps to do that. Picking a side of the building that's in the sunlight. A lot of times you and I will kind of fidget around a building to try to find a facade that's in sunlight because you count on the shadows in the sketch to make the columns or the arch stand out a little bit more.
And if you're out sketching with another person, make sure that they are not so wickedly awesome fast like Lee is, because I feel like almost every time we're out there, I'm trying to catch up to him. He's doing 2 or 3 sketches in the time it takes me to do one, and his turn out super wonderful.
Well, no, you can tell the difference. I'm like a courtroom sketch artist. And he's more like a fine artist.
Well, it's a different level of what we get into detail and the medium that we use, and one of the things that we try to do back and forth is I try to speed up some of my drawings. Sometimes Lee will try to slow some of his down, and we still try to work within our own parameters, though.
Yeah, there was when I was growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, there was a theme park called Opryland, USA, and they had a guy who would sketch your caricature. And he basically would just he'd get as many as he could get done in an hour. He would essentially sketch your big head with some sort of noodly body. Then he'd ask you what you do as a hobby, and then if you said skateboarding, he would show you skateboarding.
That's awesome.
but so that's my approach to sketching and doing urban sketching, is basically just trying to capture the gist of the architecture and do it as quickly as possible.
And I often get bogged down in the minutia, so I use very fine nibs in drawing, and so it takes me a lot longer because I have to add a lot more line work in order to build up the layering of the building. So one of the things that we'll talk about at some point as well is what we get drawn in out in the wild is sometimes a little bit different if we come back and we may finish a sketch in the studio. If we don't feel like we have enough time to finish something, come back and get it done later on.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
We seem to be making a lot of promises about future videos.
We're hoping.
Everything is just basically an advertisement for the next
That's
one.
right. Hang in there with us. We're going to keep it going.
So is there anything else we need to cover about Central Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, Georgia?
It's a great building. If you guys need if you're in the area and you need a subject to sketch, it is one of the nicer churches that we've had a chance, and we've drawn a lot of the churches around here because there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of unique character, obviously, a lot of verticality, a lot of architectonic pieces that make both of us pretty excited for a subject to draw. So you'll see a lot of churches that we've drawn. This was a fun day.
Yeah, for those of you not from Atlanta or haven't lived in Atlanta, Atlanta is an old city and has been around for centuries, not centuries, but it burned to the ground at one point. So this particular church is just one of the few surviving pre-Civil War era buildings. So it's nice to have it around to sketch. Is that good?
That's good. Thank you.